Saudi Arabia has carried out fresh airstrikes on Yemen, killing and injuring a number of people in Ma'rib province. At least 4 people were killed and 4 others injured as Saudi warplanes targeted residential areas in the town of Mahliya. Saudi jets also bombed areas surrounding Sana'a International Airport. More than 16,000 Yemenis, most of them civilians, have been killed in over 5 years of Saudi-led war on Yemen. The war has pushed the country into what the United Nations calls the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Joining us on this edition of the News Review is Nasser Shakir. He's a journalist and commentator from the Yemeni capital Sana'a. And we also have Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from the British city of Bristol. Tony, so it's almost like the West has given Saudi Arabia a free pass to kill civilians here.
Well, you know why? It's because there's all sorts of geopolitical advantage here for the Americans and the British in a very long-term plan, really, to dominate the Middle East, which I think was mostly the documents of what's happening now was signed, I think, long ago at the end of the Second World War, when the Abdulaziz did a deal with Roosevelt and obviously Truman with the Americans at the end of the war for oil in exchange for influence and power. But then, of course, the British have been involved too. The British were down in Yemen in the 1960s. But I actually know personally a British soldier who was fighting in Yemen in the early 1960s, and the actual number of people killed was minuscule compared to today. I was just looking at the UN figures. They're now talking about 250,000 war dead in Yemen over 5 years. So, I mean, that's you're looking there at something like 50,000 people a year dying because of this. Well, I mean, it's not even what the UN are saying is the worst humanitarian crisis. I would describe it as a slaughter, even as a human sacrifice of people, because this is just being done for geopolitical ends. We think about the death toll of COVID-19, for example, around the world. This slaughter in Yemen is totally avoidable, and yet we've seen 250,000 people dying totally unnecessarily, and all really to prop up the Saudi regime. I think that's what this is about, and to prop up British and other weapons companies in the West who are supplying weapons that are doing the killing. So this has got to stop, and the only way to stop it, I think, is I mean, the UN, of course, used to step in situations like this. It seems to sort of fiddle around climate change more now, but we need some sort of international intervention here. At the very least, the Yemenis need to have surface-to-air missiles to shoot these aircraft down before they can kill any more people.
Nasser, Tony raises a very strong point there regarding the humanitarian crisis in the country, which the UN describes as the worst in the world. Saudi Arabia has imposed an all-out blockade. It's, starving a nation to death. Tell us more, if you can, about that aspect of things.
Well, Saudi Arabia is imposing a blockade on Yemen, and the blockade is continuing since the war started. For example, the latest airstrikes that targeted Sana'a International Airport or the neighborhoods in Sana'a or in the outskirts of Sana'a, as well as in Ma'rib Governorate. All these attacks coincided with the Yemeni commemorating the 2,000 days of resisting the Saudi war in Yemen, as well as 1 week since Sana'a authorities closed or suspended the UN flights through Sana'a International Airport over lack of fuel. So these attacks are Saudi airstrikes, and they are trying to pressure Yemenis to surrender either by force or by using the humanitarian aid as a pressure against Yemenis. So the attacks in Ma'rib has killed, I want to correct it, according to Yemen State News Agency, it says 2 out of the 4 civilians were killed are African nationalities whom their identities are unknown so far. We know that the Africans are being displaced or enforced to leave Saudi Arabia through Yemen, and the UN has been silenced over these violations by the Saudi Arabia against Africans. And when they arrive in Yemen, we hear the UN claiming or saying that the Sana'a authorities are punishing the Africans or not treating them so well. So we know that Saudi Arabia is claiming that it is fighting in Yemen just to impose the order of the UN Security Council 2016 and also the embargo in Yemen is just a support for the Saudi Arabia to continue its bombardment on Yemen as well as buying weapons from the West.
Right, okay. And Tony, despite all that, I don't know if you heard what Nasser said there in Yemen itself. Despite that, Saudi Arabia is not winning this war. It's nearly 6 years. On the contrary, you can say it's losing.
Well, that's right. And we've seen, haven't we, things like the Vietnam War, many wars, the Iraq War. These are what's called lose scenarios. So these Western powers go into countries with no intention of winning. The only point really is to ruin the country, to destroy the country, to stop its ability to function as a nation. What we're seeing here is really, I think evil is the words you use to describe it, is disabling the nation and actually trying to stop any kind of normal function. Now, let's not forget that this part of the Arabian Peninsula is attached to Saudi Arabia. And isn't that strange? Because the Saudi regime is, which by the way is a regime, it's not elected. Nobody elected Mohammed bin Salman, and they are increasingly fragile. We have what you call the glass pyramid, which means that it could at any moment shatter and all of the power would suddenly disappear from the royal family. It's not like a solid democracy at all. And in order to keep their power, they are prepared, I think, and that's why this slaughter is going on, to slaughter their fellow human beings, their fellow Arabs, just in that part of the world, because they're afraid that Yemen is a force in that part of the world, and that if they were able to have a functioning government there, by the way, the West, of course, has been really fighting this from abroad, using the Saudis as their proxies to keep this down. That if there was a functioning government in Yemen, that they would be a powerful force against not Saudi Arabia, the country, but against the Saudi royal family. And that's why they're continuing, I think, with this slaughter. And, you know, as the British will see it, the British arms companies and other European American arms companies involved in this see it as just a load more cash for their shareholders. Yeah. Unfortunately, there isn't any proper international law in the area. It's just the law of the jungle, rather like the Libyan situation. It's just that there's much higher stakes here because the Saudi Arabian regime must not be allowed to fall. That would be tragic for the Western influence in the region.
The arms dealers are certainly benefiting there. I'm afraid time has gotten the better of us. I have to end it there. Let me thank our guest, Nasser Shakir, journalist and commentator joining us from the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, and also Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us from the British city of Bristol. Dear viewers, thank you for staying tuned to this edition of the News Review.